Hey guys, tonight we walk through time-worn cobblestone and trudge down muddy lanes where chickens scatter, thatched roofs creak, and the air smells faintly of peat smoke and onion stew. You're not a tourist here, no. Tonight, you are her, a young girl in a medieval village somewhere in England, France, or maybe the Holy Roman Empire, right around the year 1300. You've got a wool dress that scratches your arms and boots that never quite dry out. And while your little brother is off poking frogs with a stick, you're being measured, not in inches or feet, but in worth. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see where and when everyone's listening from tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wipe your hands on your apron and glance across the village green. There's chatter near the church, another girl's engagement being quietly arranged. You don't know who she is yet, but you do know this. It's only a matter of time before your name comes up. You've reached the age when adults start whispering when you enter the room. Not for your singing voice or your spinning skills, but because your fertility has officially entered the conversation. Your body's changing, your voice is softer, your walk more watched. The boys you used to play with in the fields now look at you sideways, and the baker's wife eyes you like you might steal her son's attention, or worse, her family's reputation. In medieval Europe, a girl your age is less child and more potential alliance. Marriage isn't a personal milestone, it's a transaction waiting to be finalized. You pass a field where a dozen sheep graze lazily under a gray sky. That land might belong to the very man who'll end up being your father-in-law, because in this era, land means power, and daughters are the currency. One historian even joked that girls in the 14th century were land glue, binding families together the way mortar holds stone. As the sun dips and the bells toll nones, you hear talk about your cousin Margaret. She's getting married to a man twice her age who owns 3 oxen and a slightly lopsided barn. He also has most of his teeth, so hey, bonus. You wonder what that's like, to be handed off like a prized sheepdog. Margaret seemed happy enough at May Day, laughing with daisies in her hair, but today she looks different, quiet, like someone who's been traded for a sack of flour and a handshake. You remember how your mother once muttered, "Better married than a burden." She said it while folding laundry near the hearth, eyes low, voice even lower. You didn't understand then. You do now. A local friar passes by, nodding politely. He's one of many who might weigh in on your future. Because in your world, the church isn't just a place of prayer. It's the ultimate matchmaker and rule enforcer. Whether your marriage will be blessed or banned depends on how many cousins you have and whether one of them is your potential groom. Spoiler, probably. You duck into the bakery to escape the drizzle and buy half a loaf with a few copper coins. The baker's daughter, a year older than you, leans in and whispers, "Heard your name came up at the tavern." Your stomach drops. She could be teasing, or she could mean it. Mainstream historians agree that by the 1300s, marriage wasn't really about choice for girls. It was obligation, dictated by social standing and family survival. But did every family follow the rules? Not quite. A fringe account in a 14th century diary mentions a village that drew names from a hat during midsummer to test God's will. That might have just been drunk matchmaking, but hey, romance was relative. And here's the thing. Historians still argue whether girls your age truly accepted their fate or just lacked the tools to resist. Some say they embraced their duty, like good little pious daughters. Others argue resistance simmered under the surface, through songs, jokes, or the occasional broken betrothal sealed with a runaway sprint through the woods. You walk home slowly. Each step feels heavier, not because your shoes are soaked, but because you're carrying the weight of what's to come. Someone, somewhere, is already thinking about your wedding day. Not the color of your dress, but how many pigs will be in the dowry and whether your hips look birthing ready. The wind picks up. You wrap your shawl tighter and whisper to yourself, "Not yet, not me." But deep down, you know the dirt path to the altar is already being swept clean. You wake to the sound of hens squawking and the faint clatter of a milk pail. It's early. Mist hangs low over the fields, and the cold stone floor bites at your feet as you shuffle toward the hearth. But before you've even wiped the sleep from your eyes, your mother's voice slices through the morning. Get dressed, they're coming. You don't need to ask who, you already know. See, last week you bled for the first time, and no, it wasn't a private matter whispered about discreetly. Your mother checked the cloth herself, then kissed your forehead with a kind of tired pride, as if to say, well, that's that. Now word has spread like butter on warm bread. You're of age. You might be 12, maybe 13, but in 1300, that's not unusual. For girls in most rural European villages, the onset of menstruation is less a biological milestone and more a societal switch. You are, effectively, on the market. Suddenly, men twice your age, with bald spots and opinions about wheat yields, start noticing the way you carry a bucket. You feel it every time your back is turned. Downstairs, your father fidgets with his belt and talks numbers with a neighbor over ale, not even waiting until second breakfast. She's got good teeth, sturdy frame, he mumbles through a bite of coarse rye. Her aunt had twins. You're not even in the room. Doesn't matter. You're being appraised. This morning, they're coming to look, maybe to propose, or maybe just to inspect. Like you're a house with drafty windows, they might patch up if the price is right. You smooth your hair with water, pinch your cheeks for color, and slip into your least worn overdress, the one without too many patches. As you step outside, your neighbor's dog barks once and then falls silent, almost respectful. In some places, this stage is called courtship, but don't let the word fool you. There's no poetry, no moonlit walks. This is more like bartering at the market, just with fewer onions and more judgment. In upper-class circles, things get even colder. There are ledger entries, land deals, and pre-negotiated dowries that look more like contracts between small kingdoms than personal vows. Historians widely agree that the typical marriage age for girls in medieval England ranged from 12 to 16, depending on wealth and status. Noble girls often married earlier than their peasant counterparts, which sounds backward until you remember that noble marriages were strategic. The younger the bride, the more pliable, and the less likely she'd already fallen in love with someone inconvenient, like a falconer's apprentice with dreamy eyes and no land. Still, not everyone agreed on the exact right time. Church law technically set the minimum age for marriage at 12 for girls, 14 for boys. But enforcement? Spotty at best. There are records of bishops turning a blind eye, especially when the dowry was large enough to hush any moral concerns. Now, here's where it gets weird. In parts of Italy, some girls were promised as future brides before they could even speak full sentences. One fringe tradition in Genoa involved inscribing engagement tokens with both children's names and burying them beneath the hearthstone of the girl's house, as if the floor itself would keep her faithful until the big day. Whether this was symbolic or just creepy, historians still argue. You stand with your hands clasped as the visitors arrive. One is an older man with a limp and laugh lines that suggest he's more interested in ale than affection. He nods at you like he's examining a piece of timber, knocking quietly for rot. His brother does most of the talking. She'll make a fine mother. Quiet, too, he says, clearly rating your lack of protest as a selling point. You force a smile so tight it could slice cheese. The discussion moves quickly. Your father mentions your weaving, your mother praises your strong back. No one asks if you've ever dreamed of spinning stories instead of wool. No one wonders if you might want to visit the sea, read a book, or just wait. Because waiting is for boys. Boys get to become apprentices, squires, sometimes monks. You get the privilege of maybe, possibly, becoming someone's property before your 14th birthday. By now, your fingers are numb, and not just from the cold. You're no longer a child in your village. You're a unit of value. And yet, this is supposed to be an honor. Your mother later tells you, they were impressed. He's got land near the river. She says it like that's better than a personality. Before bed, you lie awake listening to the owls. You remember the way your own name sounded when the visitor said it, slow, like he was trying to imagine it on his tax rolls. You wonder if this is how it begins for every girl, not with a kiss or a blush or even a choice,
but with a father's handshake and a nod over barley beer. Outside, the village is quiet, but your thoughts are not. Somewhere nearby, a fox screams in the night, and you whisper back, "Same." Morning light slinks in through the shutters like it knows it's not welcome. You open your eyes to the creak of the roof above and the scrape of your father's boots downstairs. It's today. The suitor is returning, with coin, with contract, maybe even with a gift goat if he's feeling generous. You stare at the ceiling beams and wonder how much your worth is written in ink somewhere you're not allowed to see. Downstairs, your father frowns over a scrap of parchment while your mother stirs oats without looking up. The room feels tight, tighter than usual. You walk in and they stop talking for a breath. Not long, just enough to make it clear you're the subject, not the speaker. "So," your father says, as if beginning a story, "he offered 3 silver marks and half a barrel of ale. Plus, he's got land. Good soil, no flooding." He looks at you like you might have questions. You do. None you're allowed to ask. Like, what if I say no? What if I want someone who listens when I talk? What if I don't want anyone at all? Instead, you nod. Barely. The kind of nod girls your age are taught to master. A nod that says, "I accept my fate, even if I'd rather run screaming into the forest and raise goats by myself." The price of a daughter isn't just a figure on a page. It's negotiated in the glow of hearths, over tankards and stale bread, with language that makes it sound noble. Dowry, they say, bride price. As if calling it a gift makes it less of a transaction. But you know better. You're what's being traded. The silver? That's just the receipt. Mainstream scholars agree that dowries in the 14th century varied wildly depending on geography, class, and desperation. In England, peasant girls might be married off with a cow, a chest, and some homespun linen. In Florence, upper-class dowries could bankrupt entire families. There are surviving documents showing fathers pleading with city councils for dowry loans, as if marrying off a daughter was the medieval version of a college application fee. What's stranger, though, are the fringe cases. In parts of Eastern Europe, some families negotiated reverse dowries, where the groom paid the bride's family for taking on a woman with good hips and no curse upon her womb. Yes, that's a direct quote from a Lithuanian marriage ledger. Historians still argue whether this was common practice or just a local superstition blown out of proportion by dramatic scribes with too much ink. Back in your kitchen, your mother smooths your hair with a damp hand and tells you not to worry. "It's a good match," she says. "He won't beat you unless you earn it." That's supposed to be comforting. You nod again, because that's what you do. Later, you sit outside on a log and watch 2 younger girls chase a chicken through the mud. They're giggling, shrieking as it flaps and flees. You realize they don't know yet. Don't know what happens when your value is measured in acreage, when laughter turns to silence, when a father's pride means your childhood ends with a signature and a supper. The suitor arrives with a cart and a half smile. He gives you a honey cake and calls you quiet, like it's a compliment. Your father claps him on the shoulder. A deal is struck. There's no fanfare, just a handshake and the scrape of coins on wood. You sit through supper, nodding when you're spoken to, laughing once, not because something's funny, but because you've learned when to laugh. And when the suitor leaves, you stay at the table while your parents clean up, still pretending everything's normal.
Later, in bed, your little sister whispers from across the room, "Will I get a honey cake too when it's my turn?" You don't know how to answer, so you say, "Maybe." You turn your face to the wall and let your breath slow. Sometimes girls don't get a price. Some are given to the church, sent off to convents not out of piety but practicality. One less dowry to pay, one less mouth to feed. Some scholars believe this was less about faith and more about math. Nuns didn't marry. They didn't need dowries. But their prayers counted for something, especially if they were in Latin. You wonder what it would have been like to be born a boy. Would you get to choose? Would your opinion matter? Would you be a husband or just another trader at the market of women? The window creaks open in the wind and the fire dies low. You close your eyes and think of the silver marks sitting in your father's strong box. And you wonder, if you ran away tonight, would he miss you or just the money?
The next few days are a blur of whispers and wool, your name spoken in kitchens you haven't stepped into, your future spread out like linens in a market stall. You hear it while fetching water, feel it in the glances of women who once pinched your cheeks and now measure your gait like livestock judges. You've become a topic, a walking rumor with a dowry attached. At home, your father hosts visitors with more enthusiasm than you've ever seen, refilling mugs and boasting about your skills in ways that make you sound like a mix between a saint and a strong-backed mule. "She can spin through winter and carry 2 pails from the well without breaking stride," he chuckles. "Barely complains either." You wonder if "barely" is too generous. But this isn't just about him, it's about the whole village. Because getting you married isn't a private event, it's communal business. Aunt Matilda has ideas. Your mother's childhood friend, the one with the beak nose and 13 grandchildren, definitely has ideas. And then there's Father Oswin, the local priest whose sermons are 40% scripture, 60% gossip, who takes a moral interest in every match. You sit at the table while the grown-ups talk over you. "The Hartwell boy is strong, but a bit too free with the cider," someone says. "What about the Cooper's eldest? He's quiet." Your mother frowns. "Too quiet, like his father. Might be simple." You stare at your porridge. If you dropped dead into the bowl, they'd probably finish their discussion before noticing. Matchmaking in your world isn't some sweet candlelit process. It's tactical. A chess game played by relatives, priests, and busybodies who think knowing your birth weight gives them permanent input into your fate. Modern romantics would cringe, but back then, marriage was community management. Historians agree that informal matchmaking in medieval Europe was as much a social sport as a familial obligation. Families pooled their resources, haggled, and tried to ensure alliances that benefited more than just the couple. Especially in smaller villages where everyone knew everyone else's goat and scandal. Your husband wasn't just your husband, he was your family's new insurance policy. Enter the meddling aunts. Not literal in every case, but you know the type. The woman who knows whose bread rose fastest at Easter, whose daughter wore what at Whitsun, and who kissed whom behind the blacksmith's shop after the spring fair. She insists on inserting herself into every courtship, not because she likes you, but because she knows how things should be done. One fringe story from 14th century Normandy describes a woman who carried around a hand-stitched marriage matrix, a cloth embroidered with names, dowries, and scandal ratings, like some medieval matchmaking spreadsheet. No official record backs this up, but honestly, you wouldn't be surprised if your Aunt Edith had one stashed under her mattress. Back to the church for a moment, because Father Oswin's got opinions. He's worried about moral standing and spiritual compatibility, but really, he just doesn't want another wedding that ends in brawls or bastards. The church, technically, is supposed to approve matches, especially those within the forbidden degrees of kinship. But in villages like yours, where half the population is loosely related and no one knows how to count cousin levels past third-ish, those rules are applied flexibly.
Historians still argue whether local clergy were genuinely gatekeepers of moral morality or just rubber stampers with a taste for wedding feasts. Some records show priests denying marriage licenses due to improper kinship or unresolved betrothals. Others? They married cousins and second cousins so often it probably saved ink to just bless the whole family tree. You walk to the well later, hoping for a moment alone, but old widow Grentham is there, humming and watching you like a hawk with arthritis. She smiles and says, "You'll be married before harvest, I'll wager. I've seen the signs." She gestures at a pair of sparrows nesting under the eaves, and something in your chest twists. You don't know what the signs mean. You don't want to. But you nod anyway, because denying fate is like spitting in a storm. That night, your cousin Rose sneaks into your room and flops onto your straw mattress. She's older by 2 years and already married. "He snores," she says flatly, and thinks picking his nose is foreplay. You giggle horrified. "Rose!" But she grins. "Just telling you what they won't." Her eyes go soft for a moment. Still, better him than a man who doesn't speak at all. Or worse, one who prays while he's doing it. You both burst out laughing, then hush quickly so your parents don't hear. As the fire fades, you think about all the voices that have filled your week. Your father's pride, your mother's practicality, the priest's piety, the widow's certainty, your cousin's crass truth.
But your voice, no one's asked for that. You wonder what would happen if you spoke it. Would the world stop spinning? Would the sparrows fly away? The moon rises. Somewhere outside, a fiddle plays a slow, sweet tune from a tavern too far to visit. You imagine dancing. Just dancing, not impressing, not proving, just being. But morning comes fast, and so do the matchmakers. You're at the festival now, standing near the edge of the maypole as music twirls through the air like dandelion fluff. Children dart around laughing, chasing each other with sticky hands and grass-stained knees. But you're not playing. You're being watched. Not for mischief, those days are long gone, but for signs of purity, like you're a saintly relic fresh from a reliquary. A woman nearby whispers about another girl's hem being too high, and someone else nods solemnly, as if that 1 inch of ankle might summon the wrath of Saint Agatha herself. You tug your sleeve lower and try to pretend you're not aware of the judgment, but of course you are. Everyone your age is. Your job today is to look wholesome, dance gracefully, and avoid any behavior that might suggest you've learned too much too early. Because here's the truth. Virginity isn't just personal, it's currency, the kind your whole family trades on. You are, quite literally, more valuable if you've never so much as shared a blanket corner with a boy, never flirted by the mill pond, never sneezed in the direction of a stable hand. Historians note that by the 14th century, a bride's chastity was considered both a moral virtue and a transactional asset. Noble families even had physicians examine their daughters for signs of maidenhood, though we now know that whole business was about as scientific as sniffing soup to tell if it's poison. Still, the stigma was real. A girl whose virtue was questioned might find herself passed over entirely, regardless of beauty, talent, or land. And here comes the myths. So many myths. There were tonics and teas, charms to restore virginity, and, brace yourself, crocodile dung used as a preventative measure in parts of ancient Egypt. That practice didn't exactly carry over to medieval Europe, but its spirit lived on in the form of ridiculous rituals involving herbs, amulets, and in one truly bizarre fringe case from Belgium, a girl who bathed in milk mixed with dandelion fluff every new moon to protect her virtue. Historians still argue whether these practices were genuinely believed or just desperate last-ditch efforts by terrified parents. Either way, girls like you bore the burden. You, who've never kissed anyone, are still made to prove your innocence like a thief in court.
Back at the festival, the dancing begins. You're paired with Thomas, the blacksmith's nephew, tall, freckled, and only slightly damp from nervous sweat. As your hands meet, every eye turns to you like birds to breadcrumbs. You're meant to smile sweetly, move softly, and, above all, not appear too eager. If your hand lingers too long, someone will notice. If you laugh too loudly, they'll whisper. But if you're too cold, they'll say you're cursed. There's no winning, just surviving the performance. You spin, you bow, you step, and the earth feels like it's moving beneath you, not with music, but with pressure. This dance isn't a celebration, it's a test. A live-action showcase of, see, my daughter is graceful and modest and hasn't yet sullied our family name. Your mother watches from beneath an awning, her arms folded tight. She nods once. Approval? Relief? It's hard to say. A younger girl tugs on her sleeve, asking when she'll get to dance. Not until you bleed, dear, your mother replies. Her voice is kind. The implication is not.
Later, as the music fades and the cider starts flowing, the whispers begin. You hear your name again, this time with "seems well behaved" and "still proper, I reckon," tacked on like titles after a knight's name. You clench your teeth, not because it's untrue, but because that's what people care about most. Some girls don't pass the test. You know one, Joan. A few months older than you, sweet as honey and twice as clever. She was seen behind the barn with a boy who wasn't even from your village. No one knows what really happened, but that doesn't matter. She might as well have stood barefoot in the middle of Sunday Mass. The marriage offers stopped coming, and her parents stopped bringing her to feast days. Now she sells rushlights on the roadside and keeps her eyes low. You haven't spoken in weeks, and the silence burns. You wonder, did she know the risk? Did she weigh it against the thrill of someone saying her name like it mattered? Or was it simply a mistake? Does it even matter? Her life changed not because of what she did, but because of what people think she did. The worst part? The boy faced nothing. He still jokes with the butcher's sons and plays dice behind the chapel. They say boys will be boys, but girls must be flawless. You pass the ale barrel on your way out and hear one of the older women say, "Shame about Joan. Pretty thing, but who'd want someone with a story like that?" You don't cry, you just keep walking, each step a prayer not to fall into the same trap. You don't know if you'll marry for love, for safety, or for the sheer lack of better choices, but you do know that guarding your reputation is your most fragile armor. That night, as you wash the dust off your feet, you catch your reflection in the water barrel. You look the same as yesterday, but you're not. Not after dancing under all those eyes, not after being measured by a rule book you never agreed to. You dry your hands and think, I didn't choose this game, but I have to survive it.
You're sitting on a bench outside your home, the late afternoon sun slanting across the yard as if it too is tired of watching everyone marry each other for reasons that have nothing to do with love. You roll a pebble between your fingers and think, what if it were different? What if you could just fall for someone because their laugh made your ribs shake, or because their eyes looked soft when they spoke about dogs? But in your world, love is about as welcome in marriage negotiations as a wolf at a sheep shearing. That flutter in your chest when the cooper's apprentice smiled at you last winter? Irrelevant. Your mother said he had no land, no coin, and a crooked toe. As if toes were the deal breaker in a life spent raising children and mending socks. Here's the thing. When people talk about medieval marriages, they often get stuck on castles and grand feasts, but the truth is quieter and heavier. You don't marry because of feelings. You marry to survive, to forge ties, to make sure your family doesn't end up begging grain off the reeve come harvest. For the nobility, marriage is war by other means. You've heard of Lady Ilis, who was sent off at 14 to marry a man she'd never met, all because he controlled a river that her father wanted access to. The union secured trade, tied up loose ends from a generation-old feud, and, oh yes, happened to involve a girl who wept through the ceremony. Her mother told her, "Tears dry, child, gold doesn't." Poetic in a bleak, transactional sort of way. Among common folk like you, the stakes are different, but just as high. A good match might mean access to an extra cow, a patch of forest for firewood, or neighbors less likely to steal your chickens. Historians widely note that peasant families often prioritized security and shared labor over sentiment. A husband who didn't drink too much and could keep rats out of the granary? A catch. Still, not everyone followed the rules. There's a tale, half fact, half fable, of a girl in Brittany who refused 3 suitors, then ran off with a traveling harpist. She returned 6 months later with a baby and a locket of his hair. The village scorned her, yes, but a few girls watched her with something like awe. Historians still argue whether that story ended in tragedy or triumph. Depends who tells it. You pull your knees to your chest and think about your parents' marriage. Your mother never talks about her wedding day, except to say the bread was burned and her shoes didn't fit. Your father jokes about buying her for 2 pigs and a joke, and everyone laughs, but she never does. One day, you saw them sitting silently at the table, not speaking, just sharing space, the way stones share a wall, close, necessary, but never touching. You wonder if they ever danced together, if they ever wanted each other before needing each other swallowed all the space. The worst part? You've started to numb to it. You hear talk of girls your age getting betrothed, and you feel nothing. A flicker of surprise, maybe, but mostly resignation. Like hearing there's rain coming and knowing the roof still leaks, but also knowing it always has. You think again about that Cooper's apprentice, Elias. He had a funny way of explaining things, like the grain in wood or how barrel hoops are bent with fire. You liked the way he used his hands when he talked, careful, precise. You shared 1 apple and half a smile, and nothing else. That was all it could be. He's promised now to another girl, one with a stronger dowry and an uncle who owns land by the stream. You nod when you hear the news, but inside, something small folds up and goes quiet. A fringe practice you once overheard from a traveling peddler involved a charm called lover's moss, a tuft of green tucked in a locket to stoke feeling between strangers. The idea was that even if love wasn't there to begin with, it could be summoned like heat from embers. Whether anyone actually believed in it, historians still argue. You think maybe it wasn't about belief, just hope. Because sometimes love comes after, or so they say. You've seen it, rare as it is. A glance between 2 older villagers, hands brushed accidentally while she's snapping beans and he's tying up kindling. A grin exchanged over shared chores. You think maybe it's possible, eventually, but you're not sure you'll get there. You head to the garden, plucking weeds while the sky turns golden. Dirt under your nails, ache in your back. Real things, not romance, not fantasy, just reality. You bury a root, press it firm, and imagine planting something else, maybe a seed of choice, if such a thing could grow. Tomorrow, there's talk of another suitor visiting. He's older, widowed. His last wife died in childbirth. People say he's kind to animals, as if that's a shining review. You want to scream, but instead, you nod. Again, always the nod. Tonight, you lie in bed and wonder, if you did run, where would you go? What would you become? Could you live alone by the woods, selling herbs and whispering to foxes? Could you be the girl they tell stories about? Not the one who married well, but the one who dared not to? You don't know. But you fall asleep imagining the wind as your companion and the silence as something soft.
It's the midsummer fair, and you're wearing your best smock, the one with the yellow stitching that you only bring out for feast days and inspections by strangers. The air smells of roasted chestnuts and horse dung, and somewhere nearby, a flute plays a tune just shy of being in key. You're standing near the dancers again, but today the stakes are different. Today, every step you take is deliberate, not just to please the crowd, but to please the watchers, because you know they're watching. The older women in wool hoods, the fathers with creased brows, the boys pretending not to look, and most of all, the suitors and their families. You're part of the show, on display, like a heifer at market, except this time you're supposed to smile about it. You step into the circle of dancers, heart thudding. Each move, each turn, each bow is a silent advertisement. I'm graceful. I'm obedient. I'll make a good wife. Your feet ache in the stiff shoes, and the sun pokes through your lashes like it's trying to catch you blinking. But you keep moving, keep performing, because the fair isn't just about fun anymore. It's about futures. Historians agree that festivals in medieval Europe often doubled as matchmaking arenas. Peasant dances weren't just entertainment, they were vetting grounds. Parents watched like hawks, noting which girls looked strong, modest, fertile, and which ones danced too freely or laughed too loudly. A girl who danced with too many boys? Flighty. A girl who refused to dance? Frigid. There was no right amount of joy, only the approved kind. You dance with 3 boys in a row. The last one, Alan, the miller's son, smells like hay and smiles like he means it. You feel your chest flutter, just for a second. But then his father calls him over, and your moment vanishes like a sugar crumb in cider. You retreat to a bench to catch your breath. A group of mothers near you mutter about another girl, Cecily, whose hem tore during the jig. She's careless, one says. That'll be her dowry's undoing. You wonder how many marriages have ended over something as small as a frayed stitch. An older woman hands you a baked apple with a wink. You danced well, she says, even when the butcher's boy stepped on your foot. Twice. You smile politely. What you want to say is, I wasn't dancing for fun. But you don't. You chew the apple and swallow your frustration along with it. Later in the afternoon, there's a singing contest. You used to love singing before your voice became something people judged. Before you learned that too much melody could inflame the passions, and too little meant you were dull. Still, you hum a few bars as you walk past the musicians, wondering what it would feel like to sing just for the joy of it. Just once. You run into a girl your age sitting behind the seamstress's tent, her cheeks streaked with tears. Her name is Edith, and she's from the next village over. My cousin tripped me during the reel, she says miserably. Right in front of the Reeves' son. You sit beside her. He's not worth tripping over, you offer, and she almost laughs. I wanted to impress him, she admits, wiping her nose. My mother says he might inherit 2 cottages. The way she says it, like 2 cottages is a dream just out of reach, makes your stomach twist. You wonder how many girls will shape their entire lives around a boy's future property deeds. There's a fringe tradition you remember hearing once, probably nonsense, about girls in the alpine regions wearing wildflowers in their hair during dances. The more flowers, the more open they were to courtship. Supposedly, one clever girl wore every herb but flower, signaling she was interested in healing, not marriage. Historians still argue whether that was a real protest or just a mistranslated song lyric. Either way, you think she'd make a great friend. By sundown, you're exhausted, not from dancing, but from smiling, from remembering not to talk too much, not to eat too messily, not to laugh like you actually mean it. You've presented the version of yourself that's palatable to strangers, and you're not sure how much of the real you is left beneath the performance. As you head home, your mother's voice drifts behind you.
She did well, she says to your father. Alan's aunt said she looked calm and fertile. That's meant to be praise. You try not to cry. You lie awake that night thinking about the dance. Not the steps, but the eyes. The way they measured you, as if love were a kind of livestock tally. You think about Alan and his smile, and whether you'd feel the same if he didn't have a mill to inherit. Maybe love does come later. Maybe it hides in plain sight, and we learn to ignore it. Maybe girls like you weren't raised to fall in love, but to fall in line. You're shelling peas at the kitchen table when your father lays a rolled-up parchment beside your bowl. You pause mid-pod, blinking at it like it might hiss. "It's official," he says. "Contract signed." You nod because that's what you're supposed to do, but inside, your stomach flips like a trout in a bucket. You stare at the parchment. It's tied with red ribbon, sealed with wax, likely pressed with the suitor's family crest, something involving antlers or an acorn or a generic medieval bird. You don't touch it. That document, more than anything else, declares your girlhood over. From now on, you are betrothed, a word that means something between promised and trapped. In this world, paper matters. The marriage contract might look ceremonial, but it's binding, spiritually, socially, and economically. One wrong clause, and your future could be indentured servitude in a house that doesn't let you sit during meals. One favorable line, and maybe you're allowed to keep the goat you raised as a child. It's that delicate. The church requires consent. Both parties must agree freely, at least in theory. But consent, you've come to realize, is flexible in practice. If you stand still and don't scream, that counts. If your father says you're willing and you don't contradict him in public, that counts too. You don't recall agreeing in any memorable way, but here it is, a sealed scroll and a congratulatory nod. Historians confirm that in the 1300s, betrothal was a formal contract, often blessed by clergy and witnessed by family or local officials. Breaking it wasn't just frowned upon, it was considered sinful, sometimes punishable by fines or social exile. The paperwork may have lacked romantic vows, but it had weight, and ink, as they say, is harder to wash off than tears. Your mother unties the ribbon and reads the terms aloud. A dowry of 1 cow, a small patch of bean field, 3 bolts of linen, and a wedding within the next full moon. That gives you maybe 4 weeks, maybe less. You grip your chair as she reads your future like a grocery list. The groom's name is Walter. You've met him twice. He smiled both times, more out of politeness than personality. He smells like bread flour and speaks like he's talking to livestock. You'll eat well, your mother offers. He's got grain stored in 3 barns. You try to care. You really do. A fringe tale you once overheard at market tells of a girl who slipped a forged clause into her marriage contract, something about being allowed to sleep in her own room and read books on Sundays. It was dismissed as a folk tale, but a part of you wonders, what if? Historians still argue whether peasant girls ever had that kind of cleverness, or the opportunity to use it. The day after the contract arrives, you start preparing your trousseau. It sounds elegant, but it's really just your collection of future wife items. Linen you've spun, a modest necklace from your grandmother, a few wooden utensils, and your best shift. You fold everything carefully, feeling less like a bride and more like someone packing for a journey she didn't choose. At church that week, your name is announced. People nod. A few murmur blessings. One woman winks and mouths, "Good luck," which you don't know how to interpret. Walter isn't there. His mother fell ill, or his donkey did, depending on which gossip chain you trust. You're slightly relieved. That night, your sister curls up beside you and asks, "Will you still play with me after you marry?" You smile and say yes. But you both know the truth. Marriage will make you disappear from childhood completely. You'll move to Walter's house, take on his name, learn his habits, cook his meals. You'll become Walter's wife, a title that replaces your actual self. You dream of parchment that night, unrolling endlessly, line after line of duties and rules. In the dream, your name is misspelled and no one notices. You try to speak, but your mouth is full of sealing wax. In the morning, you help your mother wash linens and wonder, will Walter be kind? Will he let you rest when you're sick? Will he listen when you cry? These aren't questions you're allowed to ask out loud, but they float behind your eyes like soap bubbles, fragile and ready to burst. The sky that afternoon is heavy with clouds. Thunder rumbles in the distance. You watch the goats scramble for shelter and think, I am not a goat. I have thoughts, desires, fear. But even as you think it, you know it doesn't matter.
Not in the eyes of law or church or contract. You glance at the parchment one more time before it's stored away in a chest. It holds no magic, no escape clause, no room for scribbles in the margin. Just the weight of promises you didn't write, binding you to a man who thinks quiet is a compliment. And yet, the ink is dry, the seal is set, and so the countdown begins. The first time you see him again after the contract is signed, Walter is wearing a new tunic and carrying a basket of turnips. "From our garden," he says, as if root vegetables are a bouquet. You thank him, of course, that's what's expected. But inside, all you can think is, this is the man I'll share a bed with. This is the face I'll see every morning. He sits on the bench beside your father, talking crop yields and barley rot. Your mother brings out bread and cheese, and you hover nearby like a politely trained house cat, seen, not heard. Walter smiles at you once. It's fine, just fine. He doesn't smell bad, his hands are clean, but his eyes don't seem to hold much, not wonder, not warmth, just absence. Later, as you help your mother peel vegetables, she whispers, "He's not old, not like some." And then, because she's trying to be helpful, she adds, "And he's only buried one wife." You drop a parsnip. Yes, Walter is a widower. His previous wife, Mary, died in childbirth. You've heard this story told 3 different ways. One says it was twins, another says it was breech birth, and a third swears it was a curse brought on by a neighbor's evil eye. Either way, Mary is gone, and you are here, standing in line behind a ghost. Historians confirm that marriage to widowers was common for young girls, especially if the man had land or needed someone to care for existing children. You've met his daughter, Alice, 5 years old, quiet, watches everything. When you waved at her, she blinked like a rabbit and hid behind a barrel. You don't blame her. Walter asks you if you enjoy baking. You say yes, though you don't really. He nods like that was the right answer. Then he asks if you'll mind feeding his chickens. You say you don't. He nods again. This is what courting looks like in your world, a checklist with no spark, no laughter, just soft-spoken logistics. Some girls might envy you. Walter's not mean, not a drunk, not prone to wandering hands. In a time when could be worse is often the gold standard, that makes him a catch. And yet, you can't help but feel like a small bird landing in a bigger bird's empty nest, feathers not quite fitting in. You walk to the stream later, your feet dragging in the dust. There's a story you once heard about a girl in Bohemia who tried to escape a marriage by disguising herself as a boy and becoming a stable hand. When her voice cracked from too much shouting at horses, she was found out, but the stablemaster married her anyway. Historians still argue if it's a cautionary tale or a love story. You think it depends on who tells it. At dinner, Walter's name comes up again. He's steady, your father says, and that house of his, real stone foundation. Your uncle nods sagely, like foundation equals devotion.
You wonder if Mary died in that house, if she screamed into those same walls, if the bed he offers you was hers. Your little sister braids your hair that night and asks, "Will you wear blue at your wedding?" You consider it. Mary was buried in blue. Is that bad luck or good? There are too many rules, and none of them written down. You dream of Alice, Walter's daughter, standing at your bedside, holding a dead bird in her hands. "This was my mother's," she whispers. You wake up sweating. Walter comes again the next day, bringing honeycomb. "For your tea," he says. You try to smile, try to imagine a future where this doesn't feel like someone else's life, where you'll rise each day and bake and clean and mend and lie beside this man. Maybe even grow to like him. Maybe. Hope's a dangerous thing, but sometimes it's the only thing. As you walk him to the gate, he says, "My Mary used to laugh when the hens squawked, said they sounded like gossiping old women." You nod, unsure how to respond to a ghost you never knew. He smiles, but this one lands differently. It's softer. Like maybe he remembers she was real, not just a space you're meant to fill. That night, you sit by the hearth and listen to the fire crackle. Your mother knits, your father smokes his pipe, and you wonder, how many other girls are having these same thoughts tonight, in this village, in the next, across the fields, beneath that same sliver of moon. You think of Mary, not as a rival, but as a whisper, a woman who once stood where you will stand, who bore the same weight. Maybe you'll speak to her sometimes, quietly, to the walls or the sky or the chickens, not because you fear her, but because she, more than anyone, will understand.
It's a quiet Sunday morning, and you're sitting in the back pew of the village church, fingers pressed together in polite prayer, though your mind is anything but still. You try to focus on the priest's voice, but your thoughts drift to the wedding banns being read aloud today. Yours are among them. Walter of Hemlow and Ellen, daughter of Robert the Cooper. The words echo through the stone chamber, and you feel your name float upward like incense smoke. People turn to glance at you. Some smile, some just nod. One woman crosses herself. This is the first of 3 readings, spaced out over consecutive Sundays, to give anyone time to object. It's tradition. It's law. It's also mostly symbolic. Because even if someone did object, it would take more than that to undo a match already sealed by land, coin, and cows. You fold your hands tighter and murmur, "Amen," as if it helps. The church says you must consent, and technically you did. You stood beside your father and nodded. But consent here is a muddy thing, like walking through thick reeds and calling it a path. You've never once been asked if you want this, only if you accept it. There's a difference. The priest drones on about Saint Margaret and the sanctity of marriage, but your thoughts snag on something you overheard last week, 2 girls talking near the market. "They married second cousins," one whispered, scandal in her voice. "Third," corrected the other, "close enough to make the priest sweat." In truth, the church has rules about consanguinity, marrying too close in blood. At one point, it forbade unions up to the 7th degree, which basically ruled out half your village. By the 1300s, they'd eased up a little, but even 4th cousins could require a dispensation. Of course, noble families usually got those dispensations for a price. Historians still argue how closely these rules were enforced for peasants. Some say priests were strict and diligent. Others suggest it was all rather flexible, especially if your family brought a nice cheese or a few chickens to smooth the process. The loopholes weren't just tolerated, they were expected. Your own match is safe on paper. No shared blood, no overlapping uncles. But that doesn't stop the priest from giving a long, pointed sermon on the dangers of marrying for convenience rather than faith. You try not to take it personally, but your ears burn.
You wonder if he even knows your middle name. After the service, you linger in the churchyard. Walter joins you. He doesn't try to hold your hand, which you're grateful for, but he does stand close enough that you can smell the wax from his boots. Father Oswin said we'll be blessed next week, he says. He wants to meet about the ceremony. You nod, again. Always the nod. There's a part of you that wants to ask Walter something real, something beyond hens and harvests. You want to say, "What do you dream about? Did you love Mary? Do you think you'll love me eventually? Or will I just become another fixture in your life, useful, polite, silent?" Instead, you say, "Do you want daisies at the altar?" He shrugs, "Whatever you like." You wish he'd have an opinion, even if it was wrong. There's an old tale told in whispers by girls with big eyes and sharp tongues that if you slip a clover into your shoe before the wedding, you'll be invisible to spirits and judgment. Some say it wards off unhappy unions. Others think it's just a way to avoid tripping over your own fear. Either way, you plan to do it. You sit with your mother that evening, embroidering your wedding shift. The linen is fine, though not fancy. You're stitching tiny vines along the neckline, something soft, something just for you. She glances over and says, "Don't make it too tight. Men don't like to fuss with laces." You stab the needle through the fabric with a little more force than necessary. Outside, a neighbor's dog barks. Inside, your father snores in the corner. Life is still happening, even as yours narrows toward a single altar. You try to memorize the way your home smells: wood smoke, thyme, soap. Soon, you'll leave it, become someone else. Walter sends a message later in the week. He's ordered extra flour for the wedding feast and asked the fiddler from 2 villages over to play. It's a kind gesture. You try to feel touched. Instead, you feel like someone watching a puppet show and realizing the strings are tied to your wrists. You light a candle that night and whisper a prayer, not to the saints, not to the Virgin, but to Mary, his Mary.
"If you're out there," you murmur, "tell me what to do. Tell me how to survive this gently." The flame flickers. Nothing answers. But somehow, you feel less alone. You wake to the sound of horseshoes striking cobblestone, fast, sharp, like urgency wrapped in iron. You sit up, heart thudding. It's barely dawn, mist still curling over the thatched roofs, but something feels different, off. You swing your feet to the floor, press your toes into the cold dirt, and creep toward the window. A cart rattles past, the driver shouting something about a girl from home. You can't hear the rest, but the look on your mother's face when she bursts into your room says enough. Another girl has run. "Ida!" your mother huffs, half furious, half shocked. "She ran off in the night. The wedding was supposed to be today." You stare at her. Ida, quiet, obedient, brown-eyed Ida? You always assumed she'd marry without fuss, but now she's vanished like dew on a hot roof. By midday, the gossip is wildfire. Some say she took off with a traveling scribe. Others claim she disguised herself as a boy and boarded a merchant ship. A few even whisper she joined a convent, which is the polite way of saying she's gone and no one knows where. You can't help it. You smile. Your mother catches the flicker and narrows her eyes. Don't get ideas. Which, of course, is exactly how girls get ideas. Historians confirm that while most girls followed the expected path, a small, stubborn few chose otherwise. There are recorded cases, scattered but real, of betrothals broken by sudden disappearances, convent escapes, or even secret elopements. The church disapproved, naturally, but the countryside was wide and wild, and not every rule reached every village. One fringe account from Yorkshire details a girl named Willa who faked madness to avoid marriage.
spending 3 days babbling nonsense and biting bread loaves like they were rats. Whether she recovered miraculously or was never mad at all remains a question historians still debate. Either way, she was never wed. Back in your village, the panic sets in. Ida's parents plead with the Reeve for help, while Walter, your Walter, says, "That's why girls shouldn't be given choices. It only leads to trouble." You flinch. He says it calmly, like stating a recipe, like it's wisdom passed down in barley sacks. That night, you sit outside watching the stars appear, one by one, like witnesses too far away to intervene. You wonder where Ida is now. Cold, safe, afraid, free? Did she cry when she crossed the river? Did she look back? You imagine leaving, not in a dramatic dash, but slowly, deliberately, walking past the pastures, down the slope where the nettles grow, through the woods that whisper your name. You picture shedding your name like a cloak, becoming someone else, not Ellen, daughter of Robert, but someone unbound, unknown, unwed. But it's not so easy. Where would you sleep? What would you eat? Girls alone are easy prey, for wolves, for men, for hunger itself. This isn't a fairy tale, and you're no outlaw princess with a dagger in her boot. And yet, the next morning, you go to the stream and sit on the same rock Ida used to favor. You run your fingers through the water and feel it tug gently, always forward, not backward, never still. Walter finds you there. He sits beside you, uninvited, and says, "I know you're nervous. That's normal." You nod. He places a hand over yours. It's not rough. It's not unkind. It's just wrong. He talks about the wedding feast, about how he's ordered extra honey cakes. You hear the words, but they feel like leaves blowing past your ears. He doesn't see you. He sees a place where Mary used to be, a shape he can slot into his life without changing anything. You think about telling him, about asking for time, about daring to say, "I want something different." But you look into his eyes and know, it wouldn't land, not the way you need it to. He wouldn't be cruel. He'd just be unchanged. So you stay silent, because the cost of rebellion is high, and you don't have Ida's courage or her head start. That night, you find a clover, small and crooked, and tuck it into your shoe. Not for magic, for memory. You want to remember that you could run, even if you don't. Not yet. You sit up in bed long after your sister sleeps, staring out the window. The moon is a thin sliver, sharp as a sickle. Somewhere out there, Ida walks beneath it. You wish her well. You hope she finds peace, or at least her own name again. And as the wind sighs through the shutters, you whisper, "Maybe someday." You step through the low wooden door of Walter's home for the first time as something more than a guest. It's the week before the wedding, and today is your visit, a polite term for what's essentially a trial run of your new life. Your hands clutch a small bundle of your linens, though you won't be staying overnight. Not yet. That comes after vows. The house smells of oats and ash, not unpleasant, just lived in. Walter's mother was the last to sweep these floors, and that was years ago. Mary's touch still lingers too, pressed into the beams, hidden in the corners. You don't speak her name, but you feel her everywhere. Walter shows you the kitchen, then the yard, then the chicken coop, as if these places are exciting new discoveries. You nod, ask the right questions, point to the drying herbs and say, "Mint?" even though you know it's mint. It's not about knowledge, it's about tone, deference, politeness, all part of your training. Then he shows you the bedroom. There's nothing shocking about it, a modest bed, a woolen blanket, a carved chest at the foot, no doubt holding what's left of Mary's trousseau. But as you stand in the doorway, your breath catches. It's not the room, it's the claim, the expectation. This is where you'll sleep. This is where you'll become his wife in every sense. And this is where the last one died. He notices your hesitation. "We can move the bed if you want," he says. You shake your head no, because changing furniture feels foolish compared to what's truly being rearranged, you. Historians agree that for medieval women, moving into a husband's home marked not just a relocation, but a total shift in autonomy. The term coverture wasn't widely used yet, but the practice was real. A woman's identity, property, and legal rights were absorbed into her husband's. You weren't just married, you were merged. You begin helping in the kitchen that afternoon. His daughter Alice watches you from the doorway, one thumb in her mouth and a doll dangling from the other hand. She doesn't speak, not until you kneel beside her and ask, "What's her name?" She shrugs. You smile. "I used to call mine Lettuce. No idea why." She blinks at you. A slow, cautious smile returns. Later, Walter leaves for the fields, and you're left alone with the house. You sweep, you peel turnips, you stare at the hearth and imagine your life stretching forward like a road you've never walked but are expected to pave. You find Mary's comb tucked in the corner of the wash basin. It's simple, wooden, a few teeth missing. You don't touch it. You just look, then walk away. Let the past rest. But the truth is, you don't feel like this is your house. Not really. It's Walter's house, Walter's bed, Walter's fields. You are merely here, a presence soon to be made permanent by ceremony, but not by choice. You return home in the late afternoon with calloused hands and a splinter in your thumb. Your mother says, "So, how was it?" And you answer honestly, "Clean." She nods. That's good enough. Your sister braids your hair while you soak your feet, and you both sit quietly for a while. Then she says, "Will you come visit after?" And her voice cracks just a bit. "Of course," you whisper, though you're not sure how often married women visit anyone. Your time will belong to someone else. There's a fringe belief in some corners of the Pyrenees, mostly among shepherding villages, that if a new wife stumbles on her first day entering her husband's home, it's a sign the marriage is cursed. In those towns, they would even throw a few stones near the doorway to see if fate tripped her. Superstition? Probably. But a part of you now wonders if you should have pretended to stumble, just in case. Historians still argue about how much autonomy peasant women really had. Some records show women managing households, trading at markets, even overseeing farmhands. Others paint a grimmer picture: obedience, exhaustion, invisibility. The truth likely sat in between, shifting with personality, family, and sheer luck. You ask your mother later, "What did you think before your wedding?" She's quiet a moment, then replies, "I thought of bread, whether it would rise." You nod. That makes sense. Bread always rises, or it doesn't, and either way, you eat it. That night, you lie awake tracing the ceiling beams with your eyes. You picture yourself in Walter's house again, peeling vegetables, brushing Alice's hair, standing in front of the fire, not for warmth, but for waiting. You wonder if there'll be music, if anyone will sing, if Walter will take your hand during the vows or simply hold out his arm like offering a chair. The moon hangs low, and the air smells of damp grass and chimney smoke. You whisper the names of girls you've known, Ida, Joan, Edith, and wonder where they are, who they've become. You whisper Mary's name too, gently, like a question. Will this life become yours, or will you always feel like a guest in someone else's story?
2 days before the wedding, you sit beside the fire as dusk curls in around the cottage, and the girls of the village gather like moths around your light. They bring flower crowns, scraps of lace, and stories. Oh, the stories. Because tonight is the night before the night before, a space where truth peeks out, wrapped in hushed tones and nervous laughter. One girl asks if you're scared. Another nudges her and says, "Don't scare her." Then someone older, Marjorie, already with 2 children, sighs and says, "She should know. Better to be scared than surprised." The fire crackles as you sip something warm and spiced and brace yourself. This is the Whisper Network, passed not in scrolls, but in shared glances and stories that never make it to the pulpit. You learn quickly that what happens after the ceremony, the walk back to his house, the closing of the bedroom door, is not something anyone really prepares you for, not properly, not kindly. Someone jokes about teeth.
If he has more than 7, you're lucky. And everyone laughs, except you. Because under the laughter is something else. Tension, worry, a silent collective memory carried by girls turned women turned ghosts behind their own eyes. Historians tell us medieval people weren't as prudish as we think. They talked about sex, in jokes, in plays, in bawdy songs. But young women, especially peasant girls, were taught more about obedience than desire. You were expected to comply, not to enjoy. And when you had questions, you learned them in secret, like tonight. You ask, voice barely above a breath, "What if I don't want to?" There's a pause. Then Joan, yes, that Joan, the one who was caught behind the barn and now sells rushlights like some living cautionary tale, leans in and says, "Doesn't matter what you want. Not that first night. That one's his." It lands like a stone in your chest, but you nod because that's what you've always done. Nod and keep listening. They describe things in vague metaphors: bread rising, figs splitting, rain barrels overflowing. You're not sure what's real and what's a joke anymore. One girl claims her husband fell asleep from cider and she rolled over and pretended to snore. Another says she cried, but quietly, so he wouldn't feel insulted. A third says it wasn't so bad. He just wanted to be warm, she shrugs. You think, this is what passes for reassurance? There's a fringe belief in a tiny village you heard of once, maybe during market gossip, that a bride could put salt in her shoe to dry the man's hunger. Whether it worked or just gave them blisters is unclear, but even historians still argue if it was resistance or superstition. You wonder if anyone in your village has ever tried it. Someone starts braiding your hair. Another threads daisies into the crown you'll wear. The fire flickers higher for a moment, like it wants to contribute a voice to the conversation. Outside, an owl hoots once. Inside, you feel a quiet tremble take hold. Not fear exactly, more like anticipation turned brittle. Eventually, the others drift off. A few give hugs, one presses dried lavender into your palm. "Put this in your pillow," she whispers. "Dream of fields, not beds." You nod because it's easier than crying. Your mother waits in the kitchen when you return. She's laid out your wedding shift, pressed smooth, and a small cloth-wrapped bundle. "For the morning after," she says, "a clean cloth, just in case." She doesn't meet your eyes. She doesn't have to. You know what it's for. To prove you've done your duty, that the marriage is consummated, which is a cold word for something far too hot. If there's no blood, questions will be asked. Whispers will start. People will say you weren't pure, or that he couldn't. Either way, someone gets blamed. Usually, the woman. Always the woman. You sit by the window later, shift folded in your lap, and stare at the stars. Somewhere, a girl like you is doing the same thing. Maybe dreaming of love, maybe not. Maybe just hoping for kindness. You think of Walter. Not unkind, not cruel. Just a man who wants a wife. A girl to warm his bed, mind his child, tend his hearth. He probably thinks that's enough. Maybe it has to be. Maybe it has to be. You press the lavender to your nose. It smells like something softer than truth.
You wake with a heaviness in your limbs, the kind that doesn't come from sleep, but from waiting. Today is the day before your wedding. And while you aren't a bride yet, you feel like your old self is already being folded up and put away with the linens. The house is buzzing before sunrise. Your mother is boiling water, muttering about pies and clean cloths, while your father sharpens a knife for the roast like he's preparing for battle. Your sister runs in and out with ribbons, asking which color makes your hair look less dull. "Blue," you say, not because it's true, but because it's easiest. Everything about today is performance. You spend the morning helping where you can, though no one expects you to. Someone's bringing a borrowed cart for the guests. Someone else is bringing chickens to roast. A cousin is rehearsing her lute song even though she's never played in front of people before. It's a village affair.
Your name on everyone's lips, your face in every whispered prayer for good weather. But underneath the noise, something's gone wrong. Not in the world, in you. You feel like you're walking beside yourself, watching from a few steps back as everyone prepares for a version of you that you don't recognize. The trousseau is laid out. You've packed everything that you're meant to bring: your linens, a wooden spoon, a small comb, and a woolen shawl embroidered with the initials your mother stitched for you when you were 10. You didn't know then they would be your old initials. You'll be signing a different name soon. Historians note that a bride's dowry wasn't just about wealth. It was identity, compressed into objects. A set of sheets, a chest, maybe a necklace. That was you, distilled. Your value, itemized. A fringe tale from a coastal town tells of a girl who snuck a frog into her dowry chest, claiming it was a charm to ensure fertility. In truth, it probably just terrified her mother-in-law. But historians still argue whether she did it for luck or rebellion, or both. You sit by the fire after the midday meal, staring at your hands. They've churned butter, scrubbed hearths, mended skirts. Tomorrow they'll wear a ring and pour water for a man you barely know. You flex your fingers like a spell might rise from your palm and save you. It doesn't. Walter arrives later with a cart, and Alice sits perched up front, holding a jar of pickled onions like it's treasure. She waves. You wave back. You wonder if she'll ever see you as anything more than a stand-in for her mother. Walter helps lift a bundle of dried herbs from your mother's hands. "Smells good," he says. Your mother beams. You say nothing. You're trying not to feel like an afterthought at your own party. That evening, there's a small gathering at the tavern. Not a celebration, exactly, just a final toast before your life changes. You sip watered cider and nod as people offer advice you didn't ask for. "Keep his belly full," one man says, "and he'll never stray." "Bear sons early," a woman adds. "Sons keep a man home." A third leans in and whispers, "If he snores, roll him hard and blame the cat." You laugh at that one, just enough to feel human again. Back at home, your mother braids your hair in silence. Not the usual quick plait, but a slow, careful braid, like she's weaving a spell into every strand. She doesn't say much, just hums a tune you half remember from childhood. "You were born in a rainstorm," she finally says. "You screamed so loud, the hens stopped laying for 2 days." You both laugh, quiet and sudden. Then she stands, presses a kiss to your forehead, and leaves you to sleep, alone. One last time. You lie on your straw mattress and try to imagine tomorrow. The walk to the chapel, the vows, the bread and salt ceremony, the veil, the feast, the bed. You imagine Walter's face, kind, steady, unfamiliar, not frightening, not cruel, just a man. You imagine Mary, his first wife, sitting in the shadows, watching. You imagine Ida, wherever she is, running. You imagine Joan, still selling rushlights, still not sorry. And you wonder what kind of wife you will become. Quiet, dutiful, fated, or something else entirely. You close your eyes and whisper, "Please, let me remain something." You wake with a heaviness in your limbs, the kind that doesn't come from sleep, but from waiting. Today is the day before your wedding, and while you aren't a bride yet, you feel like your old self is already being folded up and put away with the linens. The house is buzzing before sunrise. Your mother is boiling water, muttering about pies and clean cloths, while your father sharpens a knife for the roast like he's preparing for battle. Your sister runs in and out with ribbons, asking which color makes your hair look less dull. "Blue," you say, not because it's true, but because it's easiest. Everything about today is performance. You spend the morning helping where you can, though no one expects you to. Someone's bringing a borrowed cart for the guests. Someone else is bringing chickens to roast. A cousin is rehearsing her lute song even though she's never played in front of people before. It's a village affair. Your name on everyone's lips, your face in every whispered prayer for good weather. But underneath the noise, something's gone wrong. Not in the world, in you. You feel like you're walking beside yourself, watching from a few steps back as everyone prepares for a version of you that you don't recognize. The trousseau is laid out. You've packed everything that you're meant to bring. Your linens, a wooden spoon, a small comb, and a woolen shawl embroidered with the initials your mother stitched for you when you were 10. You didn't know then they would be your old initials. You'll be signing a different name soon. Historians note that a bride's dowry wasn't just about wealth. It was identity, compressed into objects. A set of sheets, a chest, maybe a necklace. That was you, distilled. Your value, itemized. A fringe tale from a coastal town tells of a girl who snuck a frog into her dowry chest, claiming it was a charm to ensure fertility. In truth, it probably just terrified her mother-in-law. But historians still argue whether she did it for luck or rebellion, or both. You sit by the fire after the midday meal, staring at your hands. They've churned butter, scrubbed hearths, mended skirts. Tomorrow they'll wear a ring and pour water for a man you barely know. You flex your fingers like a spell might rise from your palm and save you. It doesn't. Walter arrives later with a cart, and Alice sits perched up front, holding a jar of pickled onions like it's treasure. She waves. You wave back. You wonder if she'll ever see you as anything more than a stand-in for her mother. Walter helps lift a bundle of dried herbs from your mother's hands. "Smells good," he says. Your mother beams. You say nothing. You're trying not to feel like an afterthought at your own party. That evening, there's a small gathering at the tavern. Not a celebration, exactly, just a final toast before your life changes. You sip watered cider and nod as people offer advice you didn't ask for. "Keep his belly full," one man says, "and he'll never stray." "Bear sons early," a woman adds. "Sons keep a man home." A third leans in and whispers, "If he snores, roll him hard and blame the cat." You laugh at that one, just enough to feel human again. Back at home, your mother braids your hair in silence. Not the usual quick plait, but a slow, careful braid, like she's weaving a spell into every strand. She doesn't say much, just hums a tune you half remember from childhood. "You were born in a rainstorm," she finally says. "You screamed so loud, the hens stopped laying for 2 days." You both laugh, quiet and sudden. Then she stands, presses a kiss to your forehead, and leaves you to sleep, alone. One last time. You lie on your straw mattress and try to imagine tomorrow. The walk to the chapel, the vows, the bread and salt ceremony, the veil, the feast, the bed. You imagine Walter's face, kind, steady, unfamiliar, not frightening, not cruel, just a man. You imagine Mary, his first wife, sitting in the shadows, watching. You imagine Ida, wherever she is, running. You imagine Joan, still selling rushlights, still not sorry. And you wonder what kind of wife you will become. Quiet, dutiful, fated, or something else entirely. You close your eyes and whisper, "Please, let me remain something." The rooster calls before the sun even dares to rise. You hear it from beneath the woolen blanket, your body still and heavy, mind floating somewhere between sleep and the uneasy quiet that follows a storm. Except there was no storm, just stillness. Just him beside you, snoring softly like a dog content with its place in the world. You move quietly, slipping from the bed without waking Walter. Your shift rustles against your skin, and you feel the air kiss the spot where his hand had rested gently on yours before sleep took you both. Nothing more, no rush, no pressure, just a pause that felt like mercy. Downstairs, the hearth is cold. You kneel and begin to build a fire, just as your mother taught you. Birch bark first, then the thin twigs, then the thick logs. A breath, a spark, and the flame comes to life. You watch it dance, feeling strangely proud that at least this part of your new life doesn't frighten you. A soft scuffle behind you. Alice, rubbing her eyes, dragging her doll by one leg. "I'm hungry," she mumbles. You nod and stir the pot from yesterday, heating what's left of the barley stew. She eats it without comment. Just two girls in a kitchen, starting a day that neither of them chose. You know what today will bring. Congratulations, inspections, judgment disguised as politeness. Perhaps even a discreet question or two from a neighbor. Was everything proper? You'll nod again. You're good at that. In many medieval villages, the morning after a wedding was more public than private. The cloth was displayed. The midwife might be summoned to verify virginity. Sometimes there was cheering, sometimes there was shame. Historians differ on how widespread these practices were, but the anxiety was real, etched into centuries of whispered tradition. You've hidden the cloth your mother gave you. No need to fake anything. Walter had said, "Not tonight," and meant it. You don't know what to make of that. Kindness? Hesitation? Either way, it's the first time in days you felt like someone saw you without holding a ledger in their hands. He rises late, stretching with a yawn and muttering about oxen. He thanks you for breakfast. Simple, easy, almost too ordinary for the weight of the day. You watch him go outside, wondering if this is what the rest of your life will be. Quiet meals, shared chores, polite nods, and occasional glances that almost mean something. You wash the dishes, fold the blanket, feed the chickens. The work grounds you, tethering your mind when it starts to wander too far. But there's a voice inside that keeps repeating the same question. Now what? Your mother visits near noon, bearing honey cakes and the kind of smile that says she's scanning your every movement. You hug her, briefly, and she whispers, "You did well." She doesn't ask questions, doesn't need to. In her eyes, the silence is answer enough. You wonder if she ever wanted more. Not just marriage, not just children, but more. You wonder if she ever stood in front of a mirror and asked herself if she liked who she became. You wonder if she had time to ask that at all. After she leaves, you take a moment alone in the garden. You sit on a tree stump and watch bees dip lazily between the flowering herbs. You remember the old woman's advice from the wedding. Dream of fields, not beds. You understand it better now. Fields are things you can grow in. Beds, sometimes, are places where you disappear. But perhaps not here. Not yet. Walter returns at dusk with 2 eggs and a carrot, triumphant like he's conquered a dragon. "Good day," he says. You smile, and this time, it's almost real. He asks about the stew. You tell him it's simmering. He talks about fence repairs. You nod. Alice hums softly, brushing her doll's hair with a stick. It isn't magic. It isn't romance. It isn't a ballad in the making. But it's not unbearable either. It's survival. And for now, that might be enough. A fringe tale comes to mind, one about a girl in Lombardy who married a man 3 times her age. People pitied her at first, but she slowly reshaped his home, his habits, even his heart. Not with rebellion, but with persistence. Historians still argue whether she was cunning or simply patient. You wonder if those are really different things. You lie beside Walter that night and feel his hand brush yours again. Nothing more. Just contact. Human. Unsure. Maybe he's waiting for you. Maybe you're both waiting for something to bloom that isn't fear. You close your eyes and exhale deeply. You're not sure what tomorrow brings. But today, you were not claimed. You chose quiet. You chose breath.
You chose to remain present. That has to count for something.
The days blur. The rhythm of married life settles in, not with a bang, but with a quiet sort of erosion. Morning becomes chores. Chores become meals. Meals become dusk. And you,
once a girl with nerves tangled like brambles, begin to move through your new role like someone who has been doing this forever, even if you haven't. Walter is not unkind. That matters more than you expected. He speaks to you gently, never raises his voice, and always says thank you, even for small things. Turning the stew, stitching a tunic, coaxing Alice to sleep. He never touches you without warning, and when he does, it's always like a question. So far, you've answered mostly with silence. People in the village stop calling you Ellen. Now you're Walter's wife, the new mistress of the Hemlow house, the girl who didn't run. You hear your name less and less, like it's been folded into the linens with the rest of your old life. At market, you overhear two older women talking. She's taken to it better than the last one. You don't know if they mean Mary or someone else, but it still burns. Alice begins to follow you like a shadow. She's quiet, observant, always watching your hands as you scrub or cook or braid. One day she asks, "Are you going to leave?" And the words are so sudden they knock the wind from your chest. "No," you whisper, "not unless someone makes me." She seems satisfied with that. You aren't sure if you are. Historians often speak of medieval wives as passive fixtures, bound by law, faith, and domestic duty. But that's only part of the story. Some women managed farms, resolved disputes, and even wielded influence behind the scenes. Power, when it came, was often subtle, quiet, threaded through routine like a golden stitch only the clever could spot. One fringe story tells of a woman who couldn't read but memorized every account her husband kept, correcting his math with smooth confidence. Villagers thought she had second sight. Really, she just paid attention. Historians still argue if that makes her exceptional or simply one of many clever women never written into the record. You wonder if, one day, someone will call you clever, not obedient, not sweet, not patient, just clever. You'd like that. Weeks pass, then months. Walter begins to ask you more questions. Do you want chickens or goats? Should we mend the roof this summer or next? You give real answers now. You've learned to see your opinion not as a risk, but as a resource. He listens. You're not sure he always understands, but he listens. And then, one evening, something shifts. You're in the garden, your hands deep in the dirt, when he comes to you with a new spade, one with a smoother grip, better suited for your palms. "Figured you'd prefer this one," he says. You do. You nod. But this time, the nod isn't a surrender. It's thanks. That night, in bed, when he touches your shoulder, you don't flinch. You turn toward him. It's not passion, not even affection. It's readiness, a cautious trust, an offering. He kisses you gently, and you let him. The moment is brief, simple, undramatic. But afterward, as you lie beside him, you feel something click into place. Not romance, not ownership, just recognition. You are here, fully, not just in body, but in presence. The next morning, you wake before the sun and go to the hearth. You start the fire. You stir the oats. And when Alice wanders in, still clutching her doll, you greet her with something that might actually be a smile. Later that week, you go to visit your family. Your mother fusses over your hair. Your sister asks if you miss her. You do. You tell her so. Your father pours you a drink and says, "You look strong." You nod, but this time you also say, "I feel it." On your walk home, the wind picks up, scattering petals across the path. You think about Mary, about Ida, about all the girls who never got to speak their truth. And you realize maybe you haven't spoken yours yet either, but you could, soon. That night, as you comb your hair by candlelight, you look into the polished bronze mirror. You barely recognize the girl who danced at the fair, who whispered to the moon, who thought the daisy embroidered in her shift was an act of defiance. Now, you see a woman, one who still wants more, still remembers what it felt like to wonder, but also one who has learned how to plant something in difficult soil and make it grow.
The year turns. The snow comes and goes. Your hands grow rougher, your body stronger. And still the days roll on, steady and stubborn as the plow. You've learned how to pace the firewood so it lasts through cold spells. You've learned how to read Walter's silences, when they mean worry, when they mean peace. You've learned Alice's fears, her dreams, even the way she hums when she's thinking. You've learned to make things stretch, stew, patience, time. One morning, standing at the stream to wash linens, you see your reflection in the icy water. Not a girl anymore. Your cheeks are fuller. Your eyes still hold questions, but they also hold knowledge. You smile, not because everything is perfect, but because you know things now, and knowing has become your secret weapon. Some nights, you lie awake and talk to the old version of yourself, the one who stared at the marriage contract like it was a death sentence, the one who danced at the fair under 100 judgmental eyes, the one who whispered to Mary in the dark. She's still there. She just wears a different name now. People in the village have begun to seek your counsel. What do you use for burns? Do you think it'll frost this week? Can you speak to Alice? She listens to you. You give your answers plainly. You don't act surprised. But somewhere deep down, you are. You've even begun writing your own little records, kept hidden in a folded cloth at the back of the chest. Nothing grand, just who visited, what they brought, what they asked. Maybe, someday, Alice will find it. Maybe she'll write her own. Maybe girls will stop being forgotten altogether. A merchant passes through the village one day, and with him comes news. A girl from home, Ida, has been spotted in a faraway city, working in a scribe's shop. Teaching herself letters, the merchant says with a shrug. The men laugh. The women do not. You say nothing, but your heart surges like a spring flood. She made it. At church that Sunday, you kneel in prayer, not for forgiveness, but for clarity, for all the girls still being led down paths they didn't choose. You think of Joan, of Edith, of your own daughter, if ever one comes. You pray not that she marries well, but that she's seen, heard, understood. One day, as you hang laundry in the sun, Alice stands beside you and asks, "What were you like before?" You pause. Then you tell her a story, not of chores or weddings, but of dancing in the field with your sister, of pretending you were a knight, of once wanting to see the sea. She says, "Can I want to see the sea too?" And you say, "Yes, you must." Historians often write of women as background figures in the great chessboard of medieval politics. But you now understand something deeper. The greatest resistance is often lived quietly, in holding on to yourself, in planting ideas, in raising daughters who know they can ask. There's a fringe belief, barely remembered now, that if a woman dies with her name spoken by 3 girls she raised with care, her soul turns into starlight, a light for other women to follow. Historians argue whether that belief ever truly existed. But tonight, as you stir the evening stew, you believe it. You touch your belly, soft and round, not yet certain, but maybe. If the child comes, they will know your story, not the official one, yours. As the last light slips from the window, you sit at the table with Walter and Alice. He speaks offenses, she hums her little song. You rest your chin on your hand and look at them both. These lives that twine around yours. And you think, I am not what they planned. I am what I became. You still don't know if this life is freedom, but you know it is yours. And now, as our journey fades into candlelight, your breath begins to slow. The fire has gone low, just embers now, and the house around you quiets until the only sound left is the creak of wood and the hush of your own heartbeat. You lie on your side, the weight of linen blankets gentle against your chest, and you remember, you're not that girl anymore, not the one staring nervously at parchment or spinning wool with trembling hands. You're something fuller now, a woman who carried uncertainty like a lantern through fog and still found her way home.
Whatever that home looks like. Maybe it's stone walls and warm stew. Maybe it's a field near the edge of town, humming with bees. Maybe it's not a place at all, but a feeling, soft, strong, stubbornly yours. You can still hear the whisper of old stories, of girls who ran and girls who stayed, of Mary and Ida and Joan and you. And as your eyelids grow heavy, you imagine the sky filling with stars, each one a name, each one a reminder.
You are not forgotten. You are not alone. So rest now. The hardest part of your story is behind you. You've lived it well, as best you could, with grace and grit and just enough rebellion to remember who you are beneath it all. The fire's nearly out. The wind has calmed. The house and your heart are quiet now. Sleep, sweet girl. Sleep. Sweet dreams.